Okay, last week we started looking at metaphors that are used of God the Father. Again, the purpose of a metaphor is to take that which we understand to help us understand that which is not so easily understood. Of course, God is so complex, so beyond us, that we cannot easily understand who He is, what He is. For example, God is Spirit. None of us can describe Spirit. So God takes things that we understand, such as bodily parts, and applies it to God, so we can more easily understand who God is. So that's the purpose of metaphors. Now, of course, when the Bible was written, the people of those times would have been very, very familiar with some of the metaphors. Some of the metaphors we're not quite as familiar with, but even so, they help us in our understanding. We saw the first, of course, is a father. That's something most people can relate to. It speaks of God's relationship to us. It speaks of His mindfulness of us, speaks of His willingness, His teaching, His guidance, His protection, His provision, His availability, and on we can go. That brings us to a different metaphor, and if we turn to John 15, verses 1 and 2. John 15, verses 1 and 2. Jesus is doing the speaking, and He says, I am the true vine. He uses a metaphor of Himself there, the vine. And my Father is the husbandman. Again, he's metaphorically speaking. My Father, God the Father, is the husbandman. Every branch in me, He being the vine, that beareth not fruit, He, God the husbandman, taketh away. And every branch that beareth fruit, He purgeth it, that it may bring forth more fruit. And then He makes application, which we'll not concern ourselves with. But He is the husbandman. Now, first of all, a vine speaks of the fact that God has a people. In the Old Testament, Israel is often compared to a vineyard. In the New Testament, we see the church is spoken of as a husbandry, a vineyard. Notice in Psalm 80, again, God has a people. Psalm 80, verses 8 and verse 9. Thou hast brought a vine out of Egypt. Okay, now that's speaking of the Israelites. They're like a vine. Thou hast brought a vine out of Egypt. Thou hast cast out the heathen and planted it. That is the vine. Thou preparest room before it. Gives it room to grow. And didst cause it to take deep root. And it filled the land. So God has a people. He is the proprietor of the vineyard or the people. He is the owner. He is the cultivator. We see here in these verses, Psalm 89, or Psalm 80, that we see His wisdom, we see His skill, all concerning His people. Now in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, 1 Corinthians 3, verse 9. He says, for we, talking about himself and Apollos, he says, for we, Paul and Apollos, are laborers together with God. Ye, okay, we, ye, talking about the church of Corinth. Ye are God's husbandry. That is God's vineyard. Ye are God's husbandry. So the fact that he is the husbandman speaks of the fact that he has a people. These people are represented by the vineyard. He is the husbandman, therefore he's the keeper of the vineyard. He's the keeper of the vineyard. Now notice in Psalm 121, Psalm 121, verses 3 through verse 8. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. That is, he doesn't take time off. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. Israel being his people. God has a people. And God will keep. God continually, it's keepeth. Keeps his people. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in. Whether you go out or you come in, whatever you do, the Lord is your keeper. And from this time forth, and even forevermore. Forever and more. Forever and more. God is our keeper. Now in 2 Timothy, Paul refers to this, 2 Timothy chapter 1 in verse 12. For which cause I also suffer these things, nevertheless I'm not ashamed, for I know whom I have believed, and am persuaded that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him against that day. God is our keeper. God is the husbandman. The husbandman keeps the vineyard. Now, if God is our keeper, then we are the kept. We are the kept. We don't have to keep ourselves. God is the husbandman. Now, notice in Genesis 28, Genesis 28, verse 15. Genesis 28, verse 15. And behold, I am with thee, and will keep thee in all places whither thou goest, and will bring thee again unto this land. For I will not leave thee until I have done that which I have spoken of thee of. So as the husbandman, God is our keeper. That should give us assurance. That should give us confidence. There is certainty in that. There is encouragement. There is hope. Now, if we go over to Isaiah chapter 5, we see God as our keeper. Isaiah chapter 5. Again, he's drawing a picture of Israel. He says, now, verse 1, now will I sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved touching or concerning his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard. That is, he has a people. Again, the Old Testament was Israel. New Testament's church. He hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill. That is, he places this vineyard in a very productive place. That shows his wisdom. And he fenced it. He sets it apart. It's distinguished from what surrounds it. It's fenced. It's fenced for protection as well. So he fenced it. He gathered out the stones. He removes the obstructions to the vineyard. He removes that which is a hindrance to the vineyard. This is the work of the husbandman, who is God. He gathered out the stones thereof and planted it with the choicest vine and built a tower in the midst of it. So he planted it. Now when you plant something, you do so with a purpose. You have a purpose in mind. You have an intent in mind. God has a people, and he has a purpose for that people. It also says he built a tower in the midst of it. That is, so he could watch his vineyard against any intrusions. So he could always be watching his vineyard. That's what God does. Has the husbandman. He's always watching. He always knows. And also made a winepress. That speaks of his provision for this vineyard. And he looked that it should bring forth grapes, and it brought forth wild grapes. And then he goes on to describe Israel. Israel, you started off well, but now you're wild grapes. But that's not our point. The point is the Lord has a people, and the Lord watches over that people. The Lord, as the husbandman, is faithful to his people. Now, the husbandman has servants to work in his vineyard. God puts people in our lives, and he does so for our benefit, for our spiritual benefit. God has means, the husbandman has means to take care of the vineyard, to do everything he wants with that vineyard. He can bring relief to the plants. He can revitalize the plants. He can restore the plants. He can repair the plants. So the husbandman is a very wise and skillful individual in his vineyard. And so it is with God and his people. He cares for the vineyard. 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. God cares for his people. He has an interest. The husbandman has an interest in that vineyard. And so it is, God has an interest in his people. Matthew chapter 6, Matthew 6 verse 30, Jesus said, wherefore if God so clothe the grass of the field, which today is and tomorrow is cast in the oven, shall he not much more clothe you? If God takes care of the grass of the field, then certainly we're more important than the grass of the field, more significant. Therefore, the reasonable thing is that he'll take care of his people. Psalm 115 and verse 12, God is mindful of us. The husbandman is mindful of the vineyard. He's always thinking about that vineyard, always doing for the sake of the vineyard. And that's what God does for you and I. He is the husbandman. Therefore, he possesses what is necessary. God has everything that is necessary. We don't have to come up with anything. God has everything that is necessary to bring about fruitful fields, vineyards, orchards, etc. In other words, He is the husbandman, and as such, He is all sufficient. He is what we need. The husbandman knows how to bring about fruitful fields. He knows how to bring about fruitful vineyards, how to bring about orchards. He's able. He can. And He's the husbandman of His people. He knows when and upon what to bestow labor at any given time. Perhaps this part of the vine needs work today, and this part of the vine needs work tomorrow. But He always knows. He always knows. God is our husbandman. He knows where we need work. He knows where we need repair. He knows where we need to be revitalized. He knows it all. And He has the means to take care of it all. And again, He's mindful of us. He knows the condition. The husbandman knows the condition of his fields. He knows the condition of his vineyards. He knows the condition of his orchards. He sees and He knows. And God knows the condition of His people. And knowing our condition, He has whatever it is that we need to meet that condition. So the husbandman is always aware. He's always aware of what's going on in the vineyard. Just as God is always aware of what is going on in our lives. And the husbandman, he is aware of that which will bring ruin. He is aware of that, and then he deals with such in a timely manner. Now notice in Matthew chapter 13. Matthew 13. You have a parable. Begin reading with verse 24. Another parable put He forth unto them, saying, The kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat. Now the tares look like wheat, but they're not. It's not the real thing. And this enemy went his way. But when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then hath it tares? He said unto them, An enemy hath done this. There's a lot of lessons here. The servants said unto him, Wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? That is, the tares. Do you want us to go and tear all the tares out of the ground, remove them all? But he said, No. Lest, while you gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. Now that's wisdom. He says, no, leave the tares alone. Because we don't want to do any harm to the wheat. And by pulling up the tares, you may do harm. So no. But then notice verse 30. Let both grow together. Again, there's a lot of lessons here. Let both grow together until the harvest. The husbandman not only knows what to do, he knows when to do it. And that's so in our lives. God not only knows what to do, always, He knows when to do it. We get impatient. We want answers right now. But that's where trust in the husbandman comes in. God knows when. God knows when. You and I don't. He does. So let both grow together until, and in the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, the husbandman has the authority. I will say to the reapers, God has the authority. Gather ye together first the tares, and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barns. So God knows what to do. He knows when to do it. Our work is simply this: submit to His hand. Realize that He knows what's best. He knows everything about us. He knows what's going to happen in the future. He knows. So our work is simply to submit to the hand of the husbandman. That's our job. That's our work. Just submit. Just as the vine submits, if you will, to the husbandman. It doesn't have a voice. He has all authority. He has every right. The husbandman has every right to do with that vine what he pleases. And so God has He has the authority and He has every right to do with us as He pleases. You can't accuse God of being unfair. He has that right. He has the right because He's the owner. He's the owner of all things. So He's the husbandman. He's also, another metaphor, He's our portion. Notice in Psalm 16. Psalm 16. And verse 5. The Lord is the portion of mine inheritance, and of my cup thou maintainest my lot. The Lord is the portion. He's the portion. Notice in Psalm 73. Psalm 73, verse 26. My flesh and my heart faileth, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. He is our portion. He is our portion. Psalm 119, verse 57. Thou art my portion, O Lord. Psalm 142 and verse 5. Psalm 142, verse 5. I cried unto thee, O Lord. I said, thou art my refuge and my portion in the land of the living, which is this life. He is our portion in this life. And then over in Lamentations chapter 3, Lamentations chapter 3, verse 24. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in Him. The idea of a portion in the Old Testament comes from the judicial system of allotting inheritance. It speaks of the allotment of inheritance or land. It is something allocated to us, a portion. We may best understand a portion in the realm of food, but it's what is allocated to us. We see in all of these verses that we just read concerning Him being our portion, He is a present portion. It's not something out in the future, but it is a present portion. God is our allotment. God is our portion. Now again, in the Old Testament, it's connected to the inheritance. The inheritance is a gift. It's a gift. It's not something we earn. An inheritance is a gift. A lot of people have a misconception concerning inheritance. Well, that's mine. That's what I deserve. No, you don't deserve it. An inheritance is a gift. An inheritance shows that the person who leaves you that portion has an interest in you. And because they have an interest in you, they give you this inheritance. It speaks of love. It speaks of goodwill. God is our portion. Inheritance usually implies a relation. It doesn't happen where someone just gives a portion, an inheritance, to a stranger. There's some kind of relationship. A portion affects life. You receive an inheritance that has an effect upon your life. God is our portion. There is no greater portion. There is no greater inheritance. And it affects our life. You can't claim to know God and it not have an effect upon your life. He's our portion. God is immense. God is infinite. God is incomprehensible. And He is our portion. He's our everything. Now, earthly inheritances, earthly portions, can be taken away. But not this one. This is an eternal portion. It cannot be taken away. It's unlike earthly riches. It's unlike earthly health. It's unlike anything that is earthly. God is our portion. That means He's our all. He's our everything. Riches, jobs, relationships, health, and other things, these all come and go. They all come and go. But we can say with the psalmist in Psalm 73:26 again, "My flesh and my heart faileth, but God." Earthly things fail. Health fails. Earthly things fail. But God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever. You see, most have their portion only in this world. And that's short-lived. That's very short-lived. It's fleeting. It's fleeting. But God is all-sufficient in and of Himself. And He is our portion. That means He is an all-sufficient portion. He is a portion that you will take with you in death and beyond. You do not do that with any other earthly portion. You'll never see a U-Haul truck at a cemetery. You don't take it with you. You leave it here. But God is our portion. And He is a portion that will more than suffice for every day in every circumstance. Therefore we say with the psalmist in Psalm 73:25, "Whom have I in heaven but Thee? And there is none that I desire, there's none upon earth that I desire beside Thee." He is an infinite portion. Therefore, we are rich. We are rich. Not just in this life, but for all eternity. A lot of people rich in this life, but flat broke when it comes to eternity, because they leave it all. Notice in Proverbs chapter 8, speaking of you and I being rich, Proverbs 8, verse 18. Riches and honor are with me. This is wisdom talking. Wisdom is personified. I believe wisdom here is Christ. And God is saying, riches and honor are with me. He has it all. But then notice what he says. Yea, durable riches. Durable. That can't be said of any earthly riches, because they all pass away eventually. But these are riches that endure. Endure this life, endure the life to come. God is our portion. We need to remember that. We need to always keep that in mind. When we look at earthly inheritance, when we look at earthly riches, nothing wrong with them, those things in and of themselves. You can abuse them, but that doesn't make the riches wrong. But God is a portion that lasts forever, and when we look at earthly riches, we must always remember, whether it be our health, whether it be money, whatever, doesn't matter. It's all fleeting. It all passes away eventually. We're going to leave it all behind. But there is a portion that excels all, and it's God Himself. I mean, how blessed we are to have God Himself as our portion. So we need to look at earthly things in light of. We're not saying that earthly things aren't important. We need money. We need food. We need all those things. But we need to view them through the proper lens. And God is our portion. He's what matters over all else. Because often people get confused and they treat their earthly portion as something more important than God. That's never the case. That's never the case. God is our portion. Let's look to the Lord. Heavenly Father, again,